Welcome. We're going to take a few minutes here and talk specifically about sources for Egyptian history, and then in a little more detail about the assignment you have due this week. One of the things that's, I think, so important about ancient Egypt is the fact that we have, obviously the things I emphasized, all these firsts, about first place in Africa with agriculture and cities and writing and centralized states and all the detail that we know about their lives comes from sources. And we have great sources for ancient Egypt, better than any place else on the continent for this time period, certainly. Um, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Whoops, as I go the wrong way here. First one is archaeology. The fact is that, especially because, two factors, I suppose. One is that a lot of this monumental building is in stone, which lasts, right? But even other things, we have cloth and wood and papyrus and so on from ancient Egypt, all of which survives because of the dry environment. Okay, you probably, hopefully, know about King Tut's tomb that was found in the early 20th century. Uh, Full rooms and rooms full of stuff. Well, that survives because of that dry environment. You take stuff, you bury it in the ground, and it survives because it doesn't have the moisture, which usually would cause things to rot away. So archaeological remains, not only the big stuff, but small things as well, statuettes, beads, whatever, survives and gives us a lot of information about what life was like at the time. And we're learning more and more every day. But the other part of that, though, is not just the archaeological remains, it's the fact that the Egyptians had writing. They had written sources. And that is a tremendous help for us who are trying to, learn about their society. They actually had a number of different writing systems. I just want to show you just for emphasis here. The one most people are familiar with are hieroglyphs, sometimes referred to as hieroglyphics. And you see those on this papyrus, which is a special kind of paper the Egyptians developed. And hieroglyphs developed by about 3200 BC, right around the same time of Narmer and the coming together of Egypt in a unified state. Coincidence? Probably not. Anyway, but hieroglyphs are actually hard to read, and we couldn't decipher them until well into the 19th century. They're a mixture of pictures and sounds or phonetic symbols and so on. So and they're hard to write, they're hard to translate and so on. So the Egyptians, though, had a couple of other writing systems as well. You see hieroglyphs all over. This is in a tomb painting and so on. But about the same time as hieroglyphs, they also developed hieratic, which is more like a cursive form of hieroglyphs. And you can see that here. It was written as Arabic and Hebrew are today, from right to left. And as you can see, it actually kind of looks a little bit like Arabic. There's more of a script to it as well. And then they had a third, which is even more simplified script developed about 600 BC called Demotic. And by the time we get to Demotic, we have a whole range of different sources. There's a lot of, especially in hieroglyphs, there's, like I said, there's tomb paintings and there's papyrus, but a lot of these are either, a lot of them are religious based, or they're things about government. By the time we get to Demotic, we've got all sorts of stuff. We've got shopping lists, grocery lists. We've got love letters. We got poems. We got all sorts of things to really help us build a complete picture of life in ancient Egypt. As I said, we weren't able to translate a lot of this, especially the hieroglyphs, until into the 19th century. Fascinating story about how that is. The French, who invaded Egypt, discovered in 1799 a large stone. It's about 3 or 4 feet high, I guess, called the Rosetta Stone, which is now in the British Museum in London. But we'll talk about looting antiquities later. But anyway, but the Rosetta Stone was a marker from 196 BC, and what it was it had a text, a government decree written on it in 3 different scripts. Okay, ancient Egyptian, actually hieroglyphs at the top, Demotic, sort of the cursive in the middle, and Greek at the bottom. And that's what we had. And because we, of course, could read the Greek and translate the Demotic, we learned to translate the hieroglyphs. Although, frankly, that still took about 50 years. And once, though, we could translate that, it opened up a whole range of sources for scholars studying ancient Egypt. Right? So the best sources, once again, are, for us, written sources, are what we typically refer to as primary sources. Sources from the time and place that we're studying. Okay? And you actually this week have, well, there's other types of sources as well. Artifacts, I just want to show you this because your textbook talks about it. This is the Narmer palette. It shows Narmer, the king who unified Egypt together, and shows him there on the left-hand side smiting his enemies. And it shows him again on the right side up here in this procession. What's important is the 2 sides. As you can see, he's wearing a different crown in each one. One of these is the crown of Upper Egypt, and one is the crown of Lower Egypt, showing then that he is the king of both parts of the country. Anyway, so what I start to say though is with written sources, what we want to use as much as possible are what are called primary sources, sources from the time and place that we're dealing with. And you actually have 2 primary sources this week, one of which I assigned, but well, both of them I assigned, but the other one is in your textbook. Okay, so when you read your textbook, and I hope you have here, it's on page 72 and 73. This is from the Middle Kingdom period, so sometime after 2000 BC or so, and it's a writing from a scribe, okay, someone who was one of the court reporters, and he is trying to train students, teaching them how to write. And as you read this closely, what you see is he's got a student who doesn't want to learn. You are busy coming and going and don't think of writing. You resist listening to me. You neglect my teachings. Every teacher feels like this every once in a while. But it's a fascinating document because you read it carefully. In the last lecture, I told you about tradesmen and specializations and people then in society who don't have to be farmers because of this agricultural surplus. Well, this document goes through and tells you a little bit about who there was in ancient Egypt here, right? He talks about the washerman, the maker of pots, the cobbler who does leather work, the watchmen, merchants, ship crews, carpenters, peasants, scribes, and describes a little bit of what all of their work is like. So it's a really useful document to give you insight into these different people in ancient Egyptian society. So you have this primary source, which is from Egypt. You have the second primary source, which I assigned you, which is the one by Herodotus. And that's the one you have to complete the assignment on. Okay, and you have this document, which is the primary source evaluation form, okay, which I've given you and posted on D2L. And I want you to fill this out for the Herodotus reading and then upload it to D2L in the assignment section. But the Herodotus reading is a little different as a primary source. This is a guy who goes to Egypt, right? He's not Egyptian, so he's an outsider. And one of the things you're going to see is, because a lot of African societies were not literate, a lot of the primary sources that we do have were from outsiders. Okay, so the written sources, we have to rely on somebody from outside the society telling us about it. That has pluses and minuses to it, frankly. Okay, the minus is, of course, they're not from there. So they're not going to have complete information. Herodotus is going through and he's observing certain things. He doesn't necessarily know what they mean. All right. He's not going to be able to tell you, what this means in the culture because he's not from there. Okay. But on the other hand, an outsider often will observe things that people within the society just take for granted. Okay. An outsider is going to be able to do like what Herodotus does and say, oh, wait a minute, this is different. And he's going to be comparative. He's going to say, this is different from what I saw in Greece. Okay, this is different than over here. And so that's what he does. And I think, to me, that's the value of his account. All right. So what I want you to do is you just fill out this simple form. Describing, the basics, who the author is, when was it written, where was it written, what kind of document this is, and then 3 key points that you find in the document, and then talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the document as a source for history. All right? Pretty simple, and we will do this for a number of different primary sources throughout the semester, so I just want you to get started with the Herodotus one as our first example. All right? If you have any questions about that, you can post them in the general questions discussion board on D2L or email me and I will post the answer there. All right? Okay. Thanks very much.